Small Changes by Digits 27, Chapter 25. Same old family. The kunai made a distinct thud noise as it embedded into the deformed head of one of Orochimaru's many test subjects. They weren't particularly fast or even all that smart, but they were certainly resilient if nothing else. All of them bore either a molted darkened skin or some kind of black tattoo-like pattern across their body, and Naruto could easily see that these were some kind of curse rejects, those that didn't die from the Jujutsu's influence, but didn't necessarily benefit from it either. In any case, they were mindless, mutated creatures that Naruto felt like remorse in putting out of their misery. He and the other shinobi that were with him were forced to fight these deformed creatures because of Orochimaru. Why else? They had tracked him to a large underground base that seemed to be some combination of a lab and a training facility. Of course, one of the less experienced Jonin Naruto had brought with him had managed to set off some kind of security measure, tipping Orochimaru off to their presence. He had fled along with his personnel, but not before leaving the invasion force a little gift. As Naruto swiftly used his short tanto to remove the head of one of these gifts, he couldn't help but curse the snake sounding out in his head. Now he would know they had some way to track them. It would only be a matter of time before he found the seal on Gurren. The pale snake wasn't exactly a seal master, but he would know enough to remove such a rudimentary tag that, or he would simply kill Gurren for the trouble. It was hard to tell how that man worked, if he could be called as such anymore. He flashed across the room and neatly bisected another of the monstrosities. The light leavened the creature's twisted, black, sclered eyes before it even knew it had been struck. With a flick of his blade to remove the blood and a quick glance around, he confirmed that this room had been cleared. He had ordered each and every subject killed. It was harsh, but there was no humanity left inside these people now. They had given into the corrupting influence of these twisted senjutsu chakra within the seals, its power warping and deforming their bodies and minds irreversibly. Right now, they were simply a threat if they were allowed to be let loose on the surrounding area. Namikaze-san, the floor is clear, and Nambu, one of the few the Hokage had authorized to accompany him on the mission, appeared behind him to quickly inform him. Naruto waved congenitally as he quickly resheathed his blade in a smooth motion. Ujia would have been proud. "Call me Naruto. Now, how are the other floors doing?" he asked, already moving through the elaborate but routinely confusing corridors all Orochimaru's hideouts were composed of. The top three floors have all been similarly cleared, the operatives and Jonin moving to the lower floors to aid the others. A group of test subjects have managed to barricade themselves in a surgery room on the floor below. However, the shinobi down there already are capable enough to handle them. Naruto nodded at that. Most of these people were civilians before their transformation. Their power was really only that of a talented genin at best, and most because of their tenacity. However, the squad on the lowest floor has encountered a small problem. The blonde's eyebrow rose slightly, wondering what kind of problem was enough to trouble nearly an entire squad of Ambu. "What do you mean?" he asked curiously, shifting his path towards the stairs that would take him down to said level. It often surprised him how deep these complexes of Orochimaru's went. "I think it would be best to simply show you, Namikaze-san." Naruto blinked at the evasion answer, surprised at the hint of embarrassment he thought he might have heard in the young operative's voice. However, he deferred to the white snake, letting the sandy-haired man lead him to the affirmation problem. Imagine his surprise, then, when it turned out the so-called problem was in fact nothing more than a young girl that couldn't be older than 7. Of course, there was the fact that the girl seemed to be able to move at inhuman speeds, even for shinobi, causing her to appear as nothing more than a grayish blur. In the brief glimpses from when she would pause or turn, Naruto could easily see her tattered gray clothing that revealed her as a prisoner. Obviously, the Curcio rejects weren't the only ones Orochimaru had released as he fled. "Stay away from me!" the young girl screamed as she dived beneath another unsuccessful attempt to catch her from an Anbu agent that seemed way out of his depth. The girl was fast, very fast, faster than should have ever been possible for somebody so young. It was incredible. Naruto was captivated when he stood. His eyes, used to his own speeds when moving, were able to pick her out, even as she moved, and he could see every muscle flex and relax as he did so. Her movements were perfect, almost intricately, using techniques Naruto had spent years mastering to move so quickly. Before he even knew what he was doing, Naruto flashed forward, a smile on his lips. The Anpu saw nothing more than two blurs, one gray and one red, and it was over in a mere moments. However, in that moment more was happening than they might have believed. The girl was not as fast as Naruto was. He would have been relatively insulted and shocked if she was. However, that didn't mean she wasn't slow. No, to them it was as though everything around them was moving painfully slow, almost as if the air had the consistency of treacle. He met her in the middle of the room, catching her arm as she turned away from another Anbu diving to catch her in futility. Her head snapped around, eyes widened in shock as she finally met the eyes of somebody that could see her, really see her. Naruto gave her a smile that must have lasted a fraction of a second, except to them it was long, drawn out, and genuine. Tears immediately bristled in the young girl's eyes, and in that moment, with them moving at the same speed, Naruto got a better look at her. Captivity obviously hadn't done her any favors, leaving her as thin as a twig. The redhead was sure that if he lifted her tattered shirt he would have seen her pronounced ribs poking out from her skin. However, she had managed to restrain some kind of wiry muscle, otherwise these speeds would have been impossible. Her hair was an ashen gray, matching her eyes that were currently watery and bloodshot, trimmed into a short and messy pixie cut, no doubt for convenience. Naruto wasn't sure what Orochimaru had done to her, even if he could understand why he would be interested in her, but in that moment she launched herself at the redhead, clutching him as far around the stomach as she could, as tightly as she could. "You're like me!" she managed to rattle out before semi-hysteric sobs and deep, shuddering breaths before suddenly collapsing in his arms, the energy finally leaving her. The other shinobi in the room simply stared in shock as the mission leader simply strolled into the room and caught the little menace that had been terrorizing them for the past 5 minutes without effort. A few grumbled about the unfairness of such speed. The Naruto tuned them out as he lifted the frail girl into a more comfortable position. She seemed to naturally move towards the warmth and quickly buried her face in the Jonin's chest, causing the redhead to smile softly before looking up. "Are we done here?" Naruto only half paid attention to the flickering flames in front of him, a small campfire they had set up on their way back to Konoha. It had gotten late, and it had been a trying day for many of them. There had been a lot of Curcio rejects to take care of, and a few of the younger Jonin were positively exhausted. Naruto couldn't exactly say he was in top condition either, but that was mostly because he was worried about the small bundle huddled up next to him, practically drowning in the thick blanket he had wrapped around her. The girl was so thin and frail, her skin pale almost to the point of translucency, that Naruto thought she might simply stop breathing if he left her alone too long. His fears proved unfounded, though, as the small bundle stirred at his side, a small mop of untidy gray hair popping out of the blanket. Naruto smiled sadly as he saw her look around in confusion for a moment. He had a feeling that hair was supposed to be a glistening silver, not the dull gray it had become in captivity. The girl glanced around with growing fear before her stormy eyes finally rested on the familiar red hair of the Jonin sitting next to her. You? She seemed to struggle with her words, whether out of shock or because she hadn't been taught properly. Naruto couldn't say. He had no idea how long she had been kept in that base, and she was already so young. "We're outside," the girl said in wonderment as she finally looked up, her wide eyes taking in the starry night sky as if each bright glowing speck was a piece of gold. Naruto nodded slowly, not wanting to do anything to startle or frighten the girl. "Yeah, you're outside. It's over now. You're free." He spoke softly, almost a whisper, both for the benefit of the girl and the still sleeping shinobi around the clearing. The girl didn't quite seem to believe him, just staring up at the sky like it would vanish if she looked away. Finally, though, she tilted her head down, yet still managed to look up at him with wide gray eyes that had seen far too much. "Are you from the clan?" Naruto blinked at that, but quickly reformed his features and slowly shook his head with a frown. "No, I'm a Jonin from Konoha." "What clan do you mean?" The girl's eyes only got wider as she seemed to shrink away from the redhead, huddling into the blanket like they would protect her from everything. Suddenly, she didn't seem quite as comfortable in his presence as before. But you moved so fast. I thought Naruto's eyebrow nearly disappeared into his hairline. Was there a clan out there that could move at his speeds? Perhaps a Genki Genkai of some sort? The thought simultaneously managed to excite and frustrate him. Where had these people been all his life, and why hadn't he found out about them sooner? However, his focus had soon drawn back to the girl as she shuffled away from him, her eyes not only showing her discomfort, but also the first traces of fear. But if you're not, then I don't. I can't go back now. They said they were shinobi too. However, before the girl could try and make a dash for it, and entirely possible with her improbable speeds, Naruto flashed forward a few inches, wrapping his arms around the small girl and quietly shushing her. It's okay. It's okay. I may not be your family, but I promise you, nothing is going to hurt you now. That man will never get you again. The girl froze in his grasp, her eyes widening immensely for a split second, before her entire body seemed to go limp at once. Previously unsheathed tear now freely poured down her pale cheeks. Naruto simply held her as he allowed her to cry all her pains and frustration out into his chest, painfully reminded of when he would do the same with his mother after getting hurt in training or accidentally hurting himself. Really? The girl finally managed breaking herself away from him slightly, but not so far that she couldn't feel his warmth radiating into her. Naruto just nodded, keeping a hand on her back, rubbing small, comforting circles. Yeah, you're safe now, I promise. He headed back and smiled down at her, gently wiping away the few tears that still clung to her cheeks. And I keep my promises, okay? The girl stared up at him for a long few moments before she nodded, just the first inklings of a smile tweaking at the corners of her mouth. Naruto Namikaze, what about you? He started, hoping to coax the little girl as much out of her shell as he could before returning to Konoha. The rest assured he was taking the girl back to Konoha with him. Haya, the girl whispered meekly, leaning back into Naruto's chest as she did so, and gratefully accepting the warm embrace he offered. That's a very pretty name, Haya. I mean, look at me. I was unfortunate enough to be named after a ramen topping. Naruto chuckled and was delighted when he heard the faint giggle emerge from somewhere in the huddled bundle of blankets. The gray-haired girl leaned back, and Naruto could see her tiny smile had grown a little. I like ramen. Naruto's smile became almost blinding as he ruffled her hair slightly, making her lean into a long, deep-breathed contact like an attention-starved puppy. Me too, Haya. Me too. We completed the mission with the mandatory scrub of the facility once the remaining documents and artifacts were collected, Naruto stated, finishing his report to the Hokage as he stood at attention in the old man's office, hands behind his back. Hiruzen was now firmly reinstated as Hokage, his injury having healed sufficiently to allow him back to his duties. It took a large burden off of Naruto's shoulders for now, giving him a lot more time to actually consider the older man's offer more thoroughly. Sarutobi himself nodded slowly at the report, absorbing everything and filling it all away somewhere in the head that had made him famous as the professor. Good. It is a shame Orochimaru was able to slip away from us this time, but not entirely unexpected. My student has always been exceptionally good at running away when the situation calls for it. For a moment, the usually strong Kage let his age shine through his weary eyes for a moment as he released a stifled sigh. They all are, he murmured more to himself than Naruto or the Anbu captain at his side that was reporting the operative's side of the mission. However, he quickly got over himself and gave a kindly smile down at the frail girl desperately trying to hide herself behind Naruto's legs. And who might you be, young one? Hiruzen offered with a kindly smile that could only properly be described as grandfatherly. Haya just shrank back even further, a small whimper emerging from her throat as she looked up at Naruto searchingly. She had been incredulously shy ever since they had walked through Konoha's gate. It was painfully obvious she wasn't used to seeing so many people. Naruto did his best to comfort her, offering a small nod towards the aged man. It seemed to help somewhat. Haya, the her bite down, the girl quickly darted back behind the redhead's leg, causing both Naruto and the Hokage to smile, at least until the older man looked up at Naruto questionably. We found her within Orochimaru's base, a prisoner more likely, or a test subject. However, she displayed some rather unique abilities, leading us to believe she wasn't from one of the surrounding villages, Naruto explained, making Hiruzen's graying brow rise in intrigue. Oh, the man turned to the young girl and puffed on his pipe once, blowing out a surprisingly controlled ring of smoke. Is that right, Haya-chan? Haya just looked about uncertainly before returning her eyes to the ground, not feeling confident enough to speak or answer. Well, on behalf of my village, I would like to welcome you to Konoha. All the man got out of the girl was a very quick and very small nod before she once again retreated to the safety of Naruto's legs. We weren't able to get her to talk much on the way back, but she did mention a clan. I'm sure some time away from that facility and in a warm environment will help her open up. Hopefully, we can find out where she came from and get her back home. Naruto continued, causing Haya to look up at him with wide, misty eyes and a meek smile. Hmm, the Hokage hummed thoughtfully with another long drag from the pipe. I agree. What about you, Haya-chan? The girl offered another meek nod, seemingly warming up to the kindly grandfather-like figure. Good, Hiruzen asserted as he brought his attention back up to the redhead. Thank you for offering to take her in, then, Naruto. The Jonin nodded once before blinking, giving a small start as he processed what the old man said. Wait, what? He stuttered out before looking down at Haya apologetically, realizing he might have startled her with his sudden reaction. Hiruzen, on the other hand, simply chuckled in amusement. Well, were you suggesting she go somewhere else? At that, Naruto could only work his mouth soundlessly like a beached fish for a few moments. Well, I thought maybe the orphanage, or perhaps, well, he was forced to trail off and abandon the thought, though, as Haya seemed to understand where the conversation was heading. The little girl quickly latched onto Naruto's leg like a limpet, refusing to let go and furiously shaking her head, while simultaneously trying to bury it as far as she could into his trousers' soft material. Don't want to go, wanna Naruto Nichan, she mumbled loudly into his leg, causing the Ambu in the room to snigger quietly to himself at Naruto's hopeless expression. The redhead looked up at the Hokage questioningly for a few moments before letting his body slump forward. Finally, he relented and knelt down, pulling Haya into his arms and lifting her back up into a semi-hug. It's okay, Haya. I'm not abandoning you. Nobody's abandoning you. You can come home with me for now, okay? The girl just nodded quickly before returning to nuzzling her face into his chest, only widening the older man's smile even as Naruto glared at him. After another good few moments of the girl trying to leech as much warmth from Naruto as possible, he finally set her down, which she obviously wasn't happy with as she simply returned to trying to hug his leg to death. Old man, your time has come. Of course, at that very moment, Konohamaru, known far and wide to the Anbu as having the worst timing imaginable, came bursting through the door to the Hokage's office. Behind him, through the entrance, the Hokage's assistant could be seen hopelessly peering around the frame before ducking back. I may have been gracious and allowed you to recover, old man, but now that you are back to full strength, I will defeat you and become Hokage. Grr! Of course, as pretty much everyone in the room suspected, Konohamaru immediately tripped on his too long scarf and managed to face plant into the ground. It's good to see you, Konohamaru-kun. The Hokage supplied congenially, hiding his amusement at seeing his grandson attack him with a small and poorly made cardboard kunai. I thought Asuma was watching over you today. The young boy immediately sprung to his feet, adjusting his helmet like hat where it had all fallen over his eyes. Don't change the subject, old man. The young boy's eyes quickly scanned the room, flinching back when he noticed Naruto's feral grin aimed his way. He remembered the last time he accused Naruto of tripping him. Instead, his gaze flickered to Haya hiding behind the redhead's leg and pointedly, exaggeratedly in her direction. You! You're the one who that tripped me! Immediately Haya retreated back. However, Konohamaru only took this as an admiration of guilt and pressed his accusation. How dare you try and stop me defeating my grandfather and becoming Hokage? The young boy shouted, not noticing as Haya's eyes began to water and her grip on Naruto's trousers tightly. I oughta, Konohamaru! The boy froze as Hiruzen suddenly shouted at him. His eyes widened in shock as the previously kindly old man's gaze turned stern. Gigi. However, the Hokage didn't answer him, simply boring into the young boy with his gaze before motioning over to Haya with a glance. Konohamaru turned only to see Naruto kneel down, comforting a sobbing Haya and keeping her presence up against him while whispering reassuring words. Konohamaru wasn't one to be often confronted by a crying girl. However, under the harsh gaze of his grandfather, he acted accordingly, at least as far as a 9-year-old could. I'm sorry, he quickly blurted out, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly as he stared down at his feet. Haya peeked out from the safety of Naruto's arms and stared at Konohamaru for a few moments, seemingly realizing that he had just been stupid and not actually meaning what he said. Her previously nervous expression turned into a half-hearted glare. Stupid, she managed meekly, causing Naruto to grin, as he was passively the only one to hear it. Konohamaru simply blinked and shuffled a bit further forward, still looking awkwardly. What? Haya shuffled a bit in Naruto's arms until he was facing the boy properly, still glaring lightly. Your name is so long, it's stupid, she muttered despite Naruto giving her water on the trip back. Her voice was still hoarse from long disuse. Konohamaru just froze in place as the adults around him chuckled in amusement before going red with embarrassment. Hey, Gigi, do you hear what she said to me? He whirled around and pointed at Haya again, his previous behavior forgotten in a moment. Don't you know who I am? Haya quickly nodded, allowing Konohamaru to adopt a smug expression awaiting her apology. Bakamaru, Haya weakly shot back, snuggling right back into Naruto's arms as Konohamaru went bright red again. Can we go, Nichan, please? She pleaded with wide, stormy eyes that reminded Naruto an awful lot of Anko when she was begging for Dango. Naruto looked up at the Hokage questionably and got a quick nod in return. It's okay, Naruto. I'm sure Kuma can finish up here. Go on. The Hokage offered, answering his unvoiced question. The redhead gave a curt nod, whispered to Haya to hold on tight, and quickly vanished in a flash of red, leaving a similarly colored Konohamaru still steaming in the middle of the room. However, before he could storm out and try to find the mysterious girl that had insulted him, he heard an ominous cough behind him as the old man cleared his throat. Konohamaru! Said boy could only gulp as he turned back to see the suspiciously neutral gaze of his father. Grandfather. When Naruto and Haya reappeared, it was at his house. However, Haya didn't even seem to notice as she was staring at Naruto with wide, shocked eyes. Fast! She stared up at Naruto searchingly, tugging on one of his measly red bags expectingly. You sure you're not from the clan? She asked quietly, off filling her voice with something other than nervousness for once. Naruto just smiled and ruffled her hair playfully. I'm afraid not, but if you could tell me a little about your clan, it would be a whole lot easier to get you back home. Naruto offered, hopefully only to be interrupted as Uncle hopped down the stairs, naturally clad in nothing more than an oversized t-shirt. Hey Naruto, I thought I heard you. Who's the tyke? The Violet asked in confusion as she jumped the last couple steps, tilting her head at Haya questionably. The girl shrank away from the strange new lady, but Naruto stayed behind her, placing a comfortable hand on the girl's shoulders. It's okay, Haya. This is Uncle, someone very special to me. He missed the faint hints of blush tracing Uncle's cheeks as he tossed that out so casually. She had schooled herself by the time he looked back up at her. Uncle, this is Haya, a girl we rescued from one of his facilities. She'll be staying with us for a little while, okay? However, it didn't even seem like he needed to continue. In a flash, Uncle was across the room and kneeling down in front of Haya with a warm smile. Hey there, Haya. I'm Uncle, but you can just go ahead and call me Nichan, okay? We have a lot in common, I can already tell. Naruto blinked at the warmth and sincerity in Uncle's voice. To be honest, he hadn't been sure just what to expect from his girlfriend, but this, He hadn't expected this at all. Haya surprisingly seemed to accept the sincerity the older woman offered, giving a small but real smile as Uncle reached forward and pulled the girl into her arms. There were a few awkward seconds for the younger girl, but eventually she just gave in to the warmth of the contact, resting her head against Uncle's chest and smiling serenely for the first time since Naruto had found her. "Okay, Ni-chan," she mumbled, causing Uncle to grin up at Naruto from where she was crouched. She mouthed something like, "What's her deal?" to the redhead, who just held up his hands and made a running motion over his palm, mouthing "fast" right back to her. Uncle's grin returned as she let out a silent but exaggerated sigh. Naturally, Naruto of all people had to find the unnaturally fast girl. "Well, come on then, Hana-chan, Haya-chan. I'm betting you want a bath right now." Anko stood back up, bringing Haya up with her with a sweeping motion and allowing the girl to straddle her waist as she turned towards the stairs. "Phew, you're light. You know that? Don't worry, a few days with the ramen freak over there and that'll get sorted right fast." Naruto finally snapped out of his surprise to shout indignantly, only to get a chuckle from Anko and surprisingly a small giggle from Haya herself. "His name is Topping," the girl exclaimed with more enthusiasm than Naruto thought she had in her. Of course, it only made Uncle's grin grow. "I know. It's silly, isn't it?" Uncle agreed, sending a pointed look over at Naruto, who by now had gotten over his shock and had caught on. "Says the girl whose name is something you put on Dongo." However, Uncle's grin remained exactly how it was, letting go of Haya to make a wide, sweeping motion with her hand. "Of course! What better name could there be for me? Dango is the food of the gods, after all," she exclaimed brightly, earning another small giggle from the girl in her arms, a happy but subdued smile spreading across her lips as she leaned back into Uncle's chest. "Thanks, Ni-san, thank you." The day's events finally seemed to catch up to the girl as she slowly drifted into sleep, resting there against Uncle's bosom. Naruto followed the two upstairs all the way to the bathroom door. "That was something," he offered lamely, still not quite sure what to make of Uncle's sudden compassion side. She rarely warmed up to anybody so quickly. "What can I say? I'm just awesome, and even the kiddies know it," she shot back with a smirk as she pushed open the door with her rear. However, her expression quickly turned somber as she ran a hand through Haya's ashen hair. "I know a little of what she's feeling at least. He's touched both our lives for the worst." The sudden mood dropped past soon enough, though, as she managed to find a smile somewhere inside her, turning it on Naruto like a weapon. "Of course you would find her, wouldn't you?" Naruto just waved a sheepish chuckle before becoming a little more serious. "You are okay with this, right?" He motioned with his head to the girl now napping in her arms. Uncle just grinned in her usual cavalier way, her chest puffing up proudly. "Who do you think I am? It's just one little girl after all." She quickly turned and made to enter the bathroom, only to pause with a sudden thought. "What did you mean by fast?" "Get back here, you!" Uncle called in futility as she dived over the kitchen table, managing to knock over a few chairs in all her shinobi grace. Below her, Haya scrabbled under the table before darting out, her little legs working to take her away from Uncle. A grin would have been on her lips like it was on Uncle's. However, she currently had a few sticks of dango held there. Naruto watched the chaos of Uncle running after the faster girl from the couch, amusement threatening to split his cheeks. It seemed a nice bath, some rest, and a bit of food the next morning were all it took to bring out some energy in the young girl, as Uncle was quickly finding out. "Got you!" Uncle called out, only to jump right over the little girl as she suddenly doubled back, allowing the woman to slide across the ground to an awkward stop at Naruto's feet. "Having fun?" he asked as neutrally as possible, barely suppressing his laughter. Uncle just mock pouted at him, crossing her arms under her impressive bust petulantly. "She's a menace," she shot back, only to finally get Naruto to give in and smile, looking over at where Haya was smiling on the other side of the room. "Cute menace, though," he offered as the girl shuffled across the room and plopped down on his lap, causing Uncle's pout to become real. "That's my spot," she mumbled as Haya glanced back and forth between her new pseudo-siblings, happily content to try and forget the bad things in her past and focus on the now. "That's not what you were saying last night," Naruto returned with a smirk, referring to the fact that Haya had spent the night with them. Curled up between their bodies, Uncle simply lifted the girl up, replaced her in Naruto's lap before settling her down on her own. It made for a comical sight with Haya's head wedged between the older girl's substantial breasts. "She snuck in too quickly," Uncle asserted loudly, using Haya's arms to gesticulate madly and causing the younger girl to giggle. "How are you so fast, anyway?" the Violet asked, leaning forward and looking over Haya's head so she appeared upside down to the girl. "Gigi says our clan is special," Haya offered somewhat helpfully before nestling back into her second favorite spot, namely between Uncle's breasts again. Consciously, it was also one of Naruto's favorite spots, but that was besides the point. Uncle turned back to Naruto only to see the redhead shrug, mouthing Keke Genkai uncertainly. "So this Gigi, he's important in your clan?" Uncle queried, taking the reins of the conversation again. She knew just because she referred to this person as such, he wasn't necessarily an actual relative. "Yeah, he's really important. Everyone goes to him when they need advice and before Kachan." Haya suddenly trailed off, her previous happy expression melting away to be replaced by melancholy and a frown. Catching on fast, Naruto suddenly slipped out from under Anko and swung Haya onto his back in a smooth motion, earning a yell from his girlfriend at the sudden displacement. "Hey, I wanted to show you something, Haya." It didn't seem to particularly dissuade the girl's sudden turn in mood, but she nodded all the same. He quickly darted upstairs. Uncle hot on his heels when she got over her surprise, only to stop at a door that hadn't been opened in a long, long time. If anybody noticed Naruto's hand hesitant for a moment on the door handle, they didn't say anything. Uncle simply offered questioning looks. Finally, though, he pushed it open to reveal a brightly painted room that was rather bare at the moment. However, the first thing to draw the eye would be the crib set up in the corner and the various children's toys scattered about the room. "I was thinking that if you were going to stay here a while, you'd need a room, right? What do you think?" Naruto asked hesitantly, craning his neck around to get a look at Haya's reaction. The girl was just looking around the small, bright lit room with wide eyes, her grip on Naruto's back tightening for a moment. "Thank you, Nichan," she whispered, burying her face in Naruto's neck for a second before hopping off his back to look around the room. Anko came up behind the redhead and placed a hand on his shoulder, a questioning look in her face. "Are you sure about this?" she questioned, smiling softly as she saw Haya pick up one of the less baby-related toys and hug it to her chest. Naruto gave a tired smile and a short nod. "Yeah, I'm sure my parents and Tsukoru wouldn't have been happy with me holding onto a memory like this. Plus, she needs it more." Uncle's lips twisted to the side for a moment before she shrugged. "Well, all right." She grinned and walked into the room, surprising Haya by suddenly appearing below her and lifting the girl onto her shoulders. Naruto watched from the doorway, a happy but muddled expression on his features, as his own emotions conflicted within him. It only lasted a moment, though, as suddenly Uncle grabbed his hand and pulled him into the room, not content with him being a spectator any more as she swayed Haya out onto his shoulders instead. The girl squealed happily all the while, and for the first time, Naruto felt a little less heartache when he stood in his sister's room. End of chapter 25.